morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Sorry about the initial glitch, but I think that we can proceed now. So this is just a very quick introduction to the topic, just following up on precisely the news that we were just hearing from the previous clip that Flone presented vis-a-vis what is the problems that women are facing in public transport. And so with the introduction that we just heard from this clip in the news, we can see that there is a big issue related to mobility. How is it that women are dealing with mobility in Africa, of course, but also I would like just to share with you that it's not only Africa, but also this picture from New York City shows that the problems are everywhere. So the lack of women in transportation and therefore the lack of interesting, let's say, transport systems for women are not a thing only in Africa, but it is a big problem around the world. With this precisely issues, we know already, based on World Bank specific data collection, that coming back to Africa, in Tanzania, the rural road users are more pedestrians than car drivers, particularly when it comes to women. So the rural roads are more used by women walking than women driving. The other point that is important, it's from Maputo, Mozambique, where women's mobility, defined by mobility of care, is the one that is really defining the way that women travel in this country. So it's what we call the trip chaining, when women are using public transportation for shopping activities or for taking care of their loved ones. And this is in much more bigger numbers than what the men do under the same circumstances. And then, of course, when it comes to work and business related, the situation is quite the opposite. There are much more trips doing by men than by women. And then when it comes to violence and harassment, 60.7% of girls between 12 and 17 when participating in a survey indicated that they have experienced some form of violence in public space. Around the world, more than 60% of women have already said that they have experienced harassment in public spaces. And of course, public spaces are totally related to public transportation. And the last data comes from Sierra Leone, where 28% of women users of minibuses reported to have been sexually harassed, compared to 4% of women users of formal transport. And of course, when we just see back this type of picture, we can have the right, we can understand very much why women are being harassed when particularly when they don't have the right type of public transportation around for them. And so with that, to just finalize my introductory remarks, I would like to pose two questions. One, do we really understand who the users of the system are? Knowing as women are a significant market share of public transportation, much more than men, why is it we are still planning or hearing from the authorities that the planning of public transportation is not taking care of the needs of women, particularly mobility of care, safety and affordability, and of course, the travel time ratios? And then the question comes to a very clear one. Are women doing what they are doing using public transportation by choice? Are they walking by choice? Are they using these minibuses that have very little space by choice? Or is it that they have no other alternatives? And therefore, are they captive users of a system that doesn't really respond to their needs. And with that, there are three important pieces that we would like to start hearing more as we go into the second phase of this presentation with the speakers. One is the importance of data collection and analysis and the comparison between the different indexes that we can start building up on women needs. So we celebrate very much this idea of launching a chapter in Machaco City, as we were hearing at the beginning of this presentation, because when you start launching these chapters and collecting data, you start really building up the need or the awareness to compare what's going on and how can we bring other type of better practices from other places. And then once you collect the data, you can then go and start really redesigning the systems with responding to the user's needs. And one of the most important things that we need to know is that when we design public transportation systems, we are often paying attention to the peak hours. But women, that they don't need only the peak hours, they really need this trip chaining for mobility of care that they do along the day. And the last point that is very important, of course, is the innovation towards cost-effective system logistics and users' demands. So use technology, bring innovation, and definitely bring more women working in the sector. So with that, we will aim for inclusive mobility, which is pretty much lagging and which is precisely what we don't see yet in the public transportation systems around the world. So with that, let me now go back to the second part of this important session to introduce the participants that will be with us today. First, Akiko Kyushu, Senior Urban Transport Specialist for the World Bank. She will be followed by Judith Kerik, the Deputy Project Coordinator of the Ministry of Roads and Transport in Kenya. Both of them are going to talk about Kenya's specific cases. We will then go to Rwanda, where Carla Dominguez Gonzalez, a Senior Gender Specialist for the World Bank, followed by Ayan Umurerwa, Social Safeguards Specialist from the Rwanda Transport Development Agency, are going to also take the stand to showcase the case of rural Rwanda. And then we will finalize with Gail Jennings, which is, Gail is an independent researcher, very well known on the gender agenda. She will share with us the case from South Africa, something that we did a year ago, precisely along with the Some for All initiative of the World Bank. So let me start, Akiko, with you. I would like to pose a question related to women's employment and women's mobility. They go hand in hand. What is it that you are seeing from the perspective of the transportation planning and the World Bank reports in this sector in Kenya?
Yeah, thank you, Carla. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Let me share my screen. I would like to share today the overview of our gender analysis. Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes, okay. So that when we had the urban transport policy dialogue with, with the government of Kenya, we recognized that the gender disaggregated data and the analysis had hardly been considered and not hardly available in Kenya. And then as a result, most of the transport plan remain, continue to be the gender neutral. though the country's national transport sector policy recognized the existing gender inequality in the access and the mobility. So through the consultation with the Minister of current Minister of Road and Transport, we carried out a gender assessment. And then, sorry, I don't know. Okay. Then our analysis is in the two pillars, and the mobility and then employment, as Carla mentioned that. For the mobility part, we try to identify the variation in the mobility pattern and the public transport use in Nairobi by gender. We use the survey data from the existing study, which had the information on gender. Unfortunately, not all the survey data for the transport study, which a lot not in the, having the gender information. But we use the data from the Nairobi Integrated Urban Development Master Plan, and then travelers interview from the bus rapid transit feasibility study for Line 1, and then ourselves also collected additional public transport users interview together with the focus group discussions. In total, we examined around 40,000 trips for this study. And for the employment side, our assessment is to define and then serve as a baseline report on the existing employment situation for women in the urban transport sector in Nairobi. And then it was a combination of the literature review and then field research, including the semi-structured key informant interview for public sector and the private sector operator and the focus group discussions. We adopted the embedded mix method approach, meaning that the qualitative focus group and the open-ended survey response data plus qualitative examinations. For mobility, we found that in Nairobi, travel difference are basically influenced by the income, gender norm, and the violence. Women rely more on the walking and have limited access to the other the cars and the other motorized transport compared to men. And the women travel the shorter distance, and also women spend less time in travel. So that means the more restriction for women to access the opportunities. And when we see the income level, and the income level declines, particularly for women, the number of trips also declines. And then only the low income women, there are the certain number of the group said that no travel at all. That is a finding. And then also the matatus, which is a very common paratransit, and that's the most viable motorized option for men and the women. But the women faces several challenges more than the men in terms of the convenience and the safety and the securities. Our analysis also confirmed that the women make more care-related trips than men. Then for the employment side, in Kenya, women enjoy the relatively strong set of the legal and the policy protection when it comes to employment. However, just over 31% of the employee we interviewed in the public sector, women the 31% is the only women, and then more concentrated on the non-managerial and then technical roles. And now that the more women are coming to the engineering the training, however, our analysis also identified there are the recruitment bottleneck. That those women in the engineering, they are having the challenges in the finding the internship and the female role model in the transport sector, and then stereotype to continue entering the transport sector and then stay in the transport sector. And the working condition, particularly the operator side, longer hour pay gap are not strongly attractive. The many institutions has a good policy related to the equity, non-discrimination, and the sexual harassment, but the implementation need to be strengthened. And then we prepare the recommendation. For mobility, our recommendation is for policy and then governance. and the transport-related barriers, and then gender norms. For the employment side, we prepare the recommendation for each stage of the career cycles. Due to the time that I will not go for the details today. And then, this, our assessment, as mentioned, that we did through the consultation with the ministry, so shared with the ministry and the key stakeholders and owned by the ministry, and organized a dissemination workshop together with the ministry with a strong participation. And through that workshop, we were able to connect the transport sector now with a State Department for Gender, and then agreed to develop the task force for the gender in the transport sector. And they also agreed to put the activity to develop the gender action plan under the Horn of Africa Gateway Development Plan, which is under implementation to fill the gender gap. And then we also continuously having the dialogue under the urban mobility project, which is currently under preparation to achieve the inclusive mobility. So this is basically the overview of the our assessment. Then the more information is available in the published document. So I stop here. Thank you, Carla.
Thank you, Akiko. Clearly very important findings that we need to make sure that they can really become into policies. And as we will hear from the next presenters, it's also very important to bring the data that is being collected into the planning of the next systems. Judith, we would like now to go over to you precisely on understanding better the gender action plan that you're currently preparing. Could you please share with us briefly what are the main features of this plan? We cannot hear you, Judith. Still, we can't. I don't know whether it's me only or...
I don't hear either, though okay. Looks like I'm already unmuted.
So we can see you very well, Judith, but not hear you. Maybe you can reconnect. And meanwhile, yes, you are not mute. We know that. It's clearly you are not mute. So maybe it's the system. Sometimes it happened to me. So what we do is we disconnect and reconnect again. So meanwhile, if that makes sense to you, let me then go back to Rwanda. Meanwhile, and so we can start with Carla. As Carla is going to share with us the study in rural Rwanda about women's mobility. What do you think, Carla, of women and men benefiting from equally the rehabilitation of the feeder roads in Rwanda? And then we will go back to Judith.
Thank you so much, Carla. Give me 1 second that I'm having issues sharing my presentation. Let me see. Give me 1 second, please. It seems that there's still the previous one sharing. I get a message that says only one screen can be shared.
Akiko, can you disconnect yours?
Mine is disconnected. Maybe I will share Carla's from my side.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I'll start talking in the meanwhile. Well, thank you, everybody. So as Carla mentioned, we are going to share the experience of Rwanda. This analytical work was conducted in rural Rwanda, mainly for the feeder road development program, where we conducted some analysis to understand the mobility barriers that women face to benefit from the improvement of these feeder roads that were going to be rehabilitated with a strong focus on intermediate modes of transportation. Next slide, please. Next, thank you. So as part of this project, besides the rehabilitation and maintenance of feeder roads, the project is ongoing several pilots with the provision of tricycles for local community associations, which are these sort of cooperatives that are in charge of the maintenance of the feeder roads. So we found this as an opportunity to understand how the provision of these tricycles could be an entry point for the promotions of bicycles and other modes of active mobility for women. Next. So in this sense, we had 3 research objectives. First, investigate the gender difference in mobility patterns, understand also how the road construction projects are impacting different groups. We tend to think that only by the rehabilitation or maintenance of roads, everyone in the population is going to be benefited equally. But now we know that there are specific barriers that women face that might lead for them not to benefiting as same as men from these infrastructure projects. And then to identify the factors to facilitate the mobility of women through the use of non-motorized transport. Next. So for this, as Carla was saying, data collection is key. Our approach for this research was mainly qualitative. So we started with the stakeholder engagement to define the design of the study. We interviewed 15 governmental and non-governmental stakeholders. At the same time, we conducted some literature review. We analyzed the project areas to see which were the most suitable to conduct the research. We recruited local researchers in order to collect the data, and we did some analysis. In terms of the research sites, we had 3 with different geographical characteristics, because we know that this could also impact the use of women on motorized transport. So we picked Niamasheke, which is a district where the project had already finalized the rehabilitation of roads, which is a hilly project affected area. Ramagama, that is flat, but it's also an area where the roads had already been completed. And Bugesara, which is a district that even if it was not intervened by the project, we took it as a deviant case because of the high incidence of women already biking. And next. So for the next slide, so we, sorry. So for this data collection, in the next slide, we can see that we did some sort of community mapping where the participants of the focus groups were given some sort of material to draw their day-to-day activities from origin to destination. This was very useful for us to map not only the difference in destinations between women and men, but also the challenges that they were facing. Can you put next slide or there? So this is an example of the visual mobility mappings that we were doing with women and men. Next slide, please. And you can see here like how this participatory approach, we can have mapped all these destinations, the challenges that they face. This was a very interesting exercise. Next one, please. Then we did a ranking exercise when we post pictures of the different modes of transport so that people can describe about their usefulness, the pros and cons of each, so to understand which modes are more pertinent for the different activities for women and men. Next one. And finally, we did a participant observation with our research, came together with women to do their daily route together with them, but at the same time, you're referentiating the points where they were accessing and the main challenges that they face. If we have time, here we have a very nice video of how we experience the paths that women were taking. Next one, please. Well, thank you. Thank you for posing it fast. No, so you can see here the roads. If you move this faster, you can even see how women are walking, accompanied by kids, some of the infrastructure challenges that you can face within these roads, some bikes mainly used by men, Here we are discussing about the conditions of the roads and specifically these access roads. So during our research, we found out that many women were not using the feeder roads, but this other category of roads called access roads, which are shortcuts for the short distances that women mainly travel. And these kind of access roads are many times forgotten from our projects. And these are the kind of roads that women are mainly using. So we can stop the video, but I thought this was an interesting way to illustrate how we conducted the research. Next slide, please. So that were findings, and next. So here we try to analyze the mobility, but also the livelihood organization in the community. Men participate more on on-farm jobs, for example, construction, driving bicycles, and taking people to different destinations, selling at bigger markets with more bulk, while women are mainly dedicated to smaller agricultural activities. They access larger markets, which are more far away, but this has implications for them because of their time poverty and having to deal at the same time with household responsibilities. So they prefer to sell their goods in closer markets, which are smaller, but this implies that they are not getting the remuneration that they could get from their products. They are also taking long times, for example, to fetch water and not doing other time-consuming activities. Next, please. As I said, women mostly walk. Women use these typical access roads that I was mentioning. Women benefit more from the use of feeder roads and main corridors. Next one. We can even go to the next one because I know we have limited time. The markets, I already explained about the difference of the ones that they were accessing. Next. I think our colleague from RTDA will be explaining some of the benefits of the roads, but this research was also important to showcase how the rehabilitation of roads do actually also have an impact on the mobility of women and girls. They reported during the qualitative research that there were better access to services, the reduction in prices because the improved logistics that also allowed the reduction of these logistics costs had benefit for women and men. There were accompanying interventions for the improvement of local markets. Next. Next. So we have that. Okay. So next. Okay. So from the research, we identified the remaining mobility constraints for women. First, feeder roads do not reach or connect well to all women's destinations. At the same time, feeder roads are not necessarily designed to address the mobility needs of women. As Carla mentioned, there are the main pedestrians. There's no pedestrian infrastructures. There are nasty, there are narrow, and their design also enables for risk factors for violence. For example, they are dark, they are unsafe. At the same time, they lack of smaller use to bicycles or other mode of non-motorized transport because of household dynamics. Says, as we know that in urban areas, if there's a car, this will gonna be used by men. In rural areas, if there's a bike, this is all at the same time gonna be used by men. Next one. At the same time, gender norms play an important role in the usage of income. So even if women could have the possibility of paying for some sort of tricycle, for example, to transport their goods, they have less control over their income, which showcases as a barrier. Next one. Some of the recommendations to take a leverage on these pilots where RTDA through the districts is already providing with the tricycles to the local community associations. We provided with some recommendations in terms of the modes that women prefer. For example, women prefer covered vehicles that can carry heavy loads, that can bring two people together to enhance the sense of safety. For example, tuk-tuk. This we are thinking of having a pilot that goes beyond the local community associations, where these tricycles are mainly used for the transportation of material, etc. So these recommendations are pointing towards using this experience of women having access to these tricycles to provide some sort of non-motorized transport to improve their mobility in general. At the same time, we will need to work with the cell and to local cooperative associations to build a greater sense of self-efficacy on women, as one of their main barriers was the fear of using bicycles in the roads. So we can work with local organizations and cooperatives. At the same time, if we manage through this pilot to provide some sort of loans for cooperatives to provide with these bicycles, it's important that we work with the cells to manage and regulate the provision of these bicycles to impede that there's a male captor and men don't have access to this non-motorized transport. We were also discussing the possibility of having a set of collective insurance scheme so that some of the money could be used to pay to the drivers of these bicycles or for these tricycles, where we will be promoting the use of women. But at the same time, use part of this money of insurance for the maintenance of the tricycles, which we know is one of the main impediments from their usage. And as an entry point, another activity could be to train women for the maintenance and be employed in the maintenance of this non-motorized transport. Next one.
Carla, we need to.
Okay, we need to stop. Yes. Well, I'll stop there because I know that our colleague from RTD8 will have more to say in terms of the details. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Carla. Clearly, very important and specific data towards a better design of rural projects for women's mobility. Judith, you have been very patient waiting. So we can go back to Kenya, and then I will go back to Rwanda to make sure that we finalize these cases with the very specific explanation on how is it that all the findings are now really coming into the project design. So Judith, over to you.
Good afternoon. Can I be heard now?
Yes, very well.
Thank you. So good afternoon and good morning to all participants. Thank you very much. From the Kenyan side, we have just started still at the inception stage, but we expect the gender action plan to address the recommendations from the study that Akiko mentioned on the mobility, and more specifically, as we saw in the study, there is a 31% representation of women, but that is not enough because this is representation at the lower level, the non-managerial level, and also the non-technical or decision-making level. So we expect the gender action plan to help us to address this so that we can push more women to the decision-making table. We also expect the gender action plan to address the issue of data so that we keep track of data of the women and also gender as overall so that we ensure that we have a harmonious work environment. We also expect the action plan to address the glass ceiling issues, the sticky floor issues, that is the cultural issues that tend to keep women out of some of the jobs within the transport sector. And also to address the issues of employment, and more specifically to ensure that the challenges, the recruitment challenges, the bottlenecks that we have seen that face women are addressed, to ensure that career development issues for women are addressed, to ensure that there's skill development, work-life balance, and health and well-being for women who are employed within the transport sector. We also expect that under the Horn of Africa, the project that is also supporting the gender action plan, we have a gender responsive program so that we address all the issues around the gender, especially along the project corridor. Thank you.
Excellent.
Over to you.
Yes, excellent news, Judith. And clearly, there is a big advantage on having you in charge as a project coordinator. Not only because it seems you are very active and proactive, but also because you're a woman. So clearly that is an advantage, and it's part of what we heard at the beginning of this session on the video on the news, where more women are needed precisely under this transportation type of projects. So good luck. We hope that you will be achieving all that really big, huge effort to bring all the data and all the findings into the new planning of roads and transportation systems. So now let's go back again to Rwanda. Alian, you are also a key member of the project coordinator unit. So how is it that these findings that Carla Dominguez was sharing out of the feeder roads understanding and data collection are going to inform the gender action plan under the project on this project on feeder roads for Rwanda?
Good afternoon, everyone. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well, Alian.
Okay, my name is Alian, as you say. I'm a social safeguard specialist at RTDA. It's Rwanda Transport Development Agency under Ministry of Infrastructures. I'm very happy to be part of this event in behalf of our SPI coordinator who was not able to attend due to the other responsibility. So currently Rwanda is strongly committed to gender equality. For example, the Rwanda government is set up to have at least 61% of its parliament members to be women. Inside Rwanda, we have also the MIGEPROF. It's a gender and family promotion. We have also GMOU, Gender Monitoring Office, even the budgeting to ensure the promotion of gender is there. So under our institution RTDA, for this physical year, the 200 gender-based violence workshop took place. We have also the grievance redress committee, where led mostly by women. It's formed and they member their get training within 6 districts under federal development projects. Also the works of upgrading and the maintenance work provided female jobs, where we have 41% in feeder road, where we also were women. We also put in place the GBV action plan, as in Kenya it is. The action plan was prepared and implemented where we have the MOUs with the service providers who educated the women and encourage them to be involved in the project activities. In RTDA, we also have the gender specialist who is in charge to ensure that issue of gender are mainstreamed in the RTDA, and she monitors gender activities on a daily basis. So RTDA is also implemented the federal through rehabilitation, upgrading, and maintenance. We have the LCA, the Local Community Association. Those associations were given responsibility to call out maintenance on the district of Rwamagana and Gisagara, even if we have also other 2 districts in the parent project, Nyamasheke, where also the study was conducted, and Karongi, but it is a very mountain hilly, where the contractor is the one who performed the maintenance because we expected some heavy landslide, and contractors, they have trucks to remove it. World Bank read the study, and that study is very helpful, is the bringing evidence of the extent to which road rehabilitation and maintenance is improving women mobility. People in general feel that it is easy to travel to destinations that were formerly basically unreachable. Particularly during the rainy season, the people was not able to reach where they want to go. Better mobility resulted from the improved quality and resilience of feeder roads. They are bringing preparation of transport service and reduction of price. Also led the construction to move to market to the expansion of existing one. Interviews also relevant that the benefit of feeder roads rehabilitation and maintenance are boosted when complemented by other interventions such as electricity, construction and the schools. Feeder road rehabilitation has brought a special benefit for women, as Kyra says. Their reduction of fares or costs made easy for them to move big load to market, and has reduced head loading and general burden of transportation costs. Women also have benefited through increased access to hospital at lower cost. It's increased access to market, even they get the job opportunities through those community-based routine maintenance of road construction. Better road have also helped women diversify their economic activities and get involved in non-farm employment, such as articraft production through better connectivity to peri-urban areas. In some places, this expansion of opportunity has incentivized young girls to learn to ride bicycles. Increased presence of vehicle and people on the road has also improved women's sense of safety when walking along them. However, the study also identifies some key area that we are working on to improve women mobility. Through local community association, RTD is providing tricycles to transport construction material and the easy work. The tricycles also are included in the agreement between the district and the RTD. Currently, we have tricycles in the Flat district, Rwamagana and Gisagara. Currently, all women of the LCA was trained, was know to how to use those tricycles, how to drive, but they still have challenge of the driving permit. The study revealed that many women don't use intermediate mode for transport because they don't have access. Therefore, this intervention is used as the entire point to reach women to bike and gain confidence. As the next step, we have to emphasize result, and the project will support those women to get their driving license to be able also to operate those tricycles. In addition, we want to pilot in another parent district the possibility of providing electrical tricycles or bicycles, and think of way to make women more confident to bike as recommended by the report through communication, campaign, and sensitization through the Women Council.
Alian,
yes, please.
We need to start just finalizing, as we still have another presentation from South Africa. So please, you have 1 more minute.
Okay, thank you. Yes, in addition, we need also to see how we can use the provisional sum to support the inclusion of the interventions such as storage facility, lightening, waiting areas, and bike path, also the way of bicycles during road construction. Thank you.
So thank you, Alian. Indeed, a lot of the findings that the study has already shared are going to be incorporated in the new way of designing these feeder roads. Just to underline that we are totally aware that the feeder roads are as important for men and women, but precisely because of the data that has been collected, now women are going to have a much better chance to use them equally, precisely. So congratulations on the effort, and looking forward to hear more about the not only the findings, but the model that you may bring to others as you are moving into this new type of designs. So thank you, Alian. Gail.
Yes, sure, noted.
Thank you. Gail, hi, how are you? Welcome. We're very happy to hear you here. And I'm totally conscious about the time, but we really want to hear about the last case today, which is related to the work that we have done in South Africa. Maybe I don't need to introduce it further. I will just pass the baton to you so you can share with us precisely this assessment and road action plan in South Africa.
Thank you. And I really enjoyed the last few presentations. So thank you very much for the invitation. And I would have been very happy just to carry on listening. It doesn't seem like I can share my screen. I think I've got the same issue. It says one participant can share at a time. Okay, let's just see if this works.
It's coming, yes.
Okay. So there's always, but thank you. I'm very well aware of the time, so I won't go through everything in great detail. But what we wanted to share is work that we did with the World Bank and the Sustainable Mobility for All working group, gender working group, which is essentially about how, sorry, I'm just trying to work on with separate, okay, there we go. I'm not using my computer, so I'm feeling slightly kind of inadequate about technology at the moment. So we know, as all of us who are attending the conference, and we've been speaking about this for the last few days, that there are significant gender and transport challenges, but there are no systematic or replicable approaches to trying to conduct some kind of a gap analysis. So we know that there are problems with policies. We know that we need to do something. We know that our strategies aren't working. But there has been identified a lack of just a very straightforward, systematic approach to understanding precisely where these gaps are, and a replicable way of trying to understand the gaps and close the gaps. So Some for All approached the World Bank to develop a straightforward or simple toolkit just to try and systematize this approach to gap analysis, and something that could be replicable. So I'm going to share that very, very briefly. It's the wonderful thing about this toolkit is that it is so simple, and I've presented about it before and I struggled because it's almost so simple that it seems there's not too much to say about it, and that is what I really encourage you to explore about this method, because it's something that just gives us an opportunity to look at how policies align with benchmarks and best practices, and gives you the confidence in knowing that what you are identifying as gaps are in fact gaps, and that the way you are approaching trying to close the gaps are recognized as good practice and appropriate practice, and it will give people who work with this tool just that confidence in that structure. So we applied the pilot method in South Africa, and I won't go into too much detail about our findings in South Africa because they're interesting, but I would really encourage you to look at the method. It's because that's what you can use. So Some for All has what we call the Global Roadmap of Action, and I will call it the GRA in this presentation. And it's the product of extensive stakeholder engagement to come up with 197, I know it's a very specific number, but 197 policy measures that countries or provinces or cities can implement to achieve sustainable mobility in a country. So these are not specifically gender. This is to achieve sustainable mobility in a country in whatever form. And of those GRA policy measures, about 60, 70 are quite generically or specifically related to gender. And in South Africa, we identified 31 exactly. So what the GRA does is it provides a detailed description of each of these 197 policy measures in terms of a general best practice and then a gender-specific best practice. So this is one example. It's actually not the best example because it doesn't have particularly good gender-based practice. But so of these measures, there will be the best practice policy. In this example, expand public transport infrastructure, the general best practice, which would be to specifically prioritize it in a particular way, and in a gender-based practice to ensure that you focus on equitable and gender-responsive access. So each of these best practices in the document have got this kind of structure. So the systematic approach that we identified with the World Bank is to have a look at these particular best practice policies and look at the benchmarks that I've described, and then collate and collect the country measures. Or we could also use city measures, whichever your particular sort of variable is, that respond to these gender and general benchmarks. It's unlikely to ever be one policy. So if, for example, you have a policy which is or a best practice, which is to address gender-based violence in public transport, you would collate all of the policies or strategies or projects or programs that relate to that particular best practice. Have a summary of your country's policy response and look at how it aligns against the best practices that Some for All has proposed. So you would see multiple gaps, and in many instances, these gaps could be responded to by multiple different policies or strategies. And then finally, you would reach some possible high-level interventions to close the gap. And again, this could be multiple policies. It's quite a difficult, it sounds a lot more complicated because I'm not going through it and, I could be clicking through it and showing you exactly what to do, but it really works very, very well because it gives you a way of just sort of systematizing what you're doing. And that was an approach that we could not find anywhere, which is why Some for All approached the World Bank to develop this. And, in hindsight, it seems so simple, but it really, really works. So I encourage everyone who's working in looking at gap analysis to get hold of or contact me or Carla for the full document and to access the toolkit that we've developed. So essentially, I'm going to go through this quickly. I won't go through all this, but these are some examples of gender-relevant best practices from the GRA. So to develop mobility plans at subnational level. So that'd be a high-level best practice. In the document, there would be a detailed description of what best practice is for developing a mobility plan at a subnational level. And then there would be a gender best practice, which would be how exactly would you pay attention to gender within that best practice. And you work through your set of best practices that relate to gender and have a look at how they align or where they don't align. In South Africa, for the pilot, we assessed more than 200 relevant policy measures against these 31 best practice measures, and then we grouped them into 10 topics, which would be integrated transport planning, gender mainstreaming, personal security, road safety, knowledge sharing, data collection, and women as transport workers, infrastructure and access, and social and environmental impact, and social stakeholder engagement. So we collected our gaps and grouped them into 10 topics. And then obviously the whole point of a gap analysis is to see how you can close the gap. So we, taking the top 5 themes that I described, we then looked at what policies need to be developed or strategies need to be developed to close the gap. And again, this is relatively standard gap analysis processes, but until now we haven't seen what to measure the gap against. And I found this to be inordinately useful in looking at policy in South Africa, but also looking at gap analysis in any other kind of transport gap. It doesn't have to be gender. It's because the GRA isn't gender focused only. It's about sustainable mobility. So it works as a framework for any kind of gap analysis and a way of closing the gaps. So you can develop a roadmap this way. And I realize this is very quick. I just whizzed through it because I know we're running out of time. But please do contact me or Carla. I think you will have our details, and we can share with you the full report and a shorter version of the report. We have an interactive spreadsheet that you can use to do your rankings and your ratings of how to assess which are the gaps that you need to focus on the most, because obviously you will be talked through the process in doing the gap analysis to focus on interventions that not necessarily have the biggest gap, but have the greatest potential to achieve whatever the goal might be. So I hope that's not too cryptic a summary, and I'm very happy if there's time for questions or to be contacted later for more discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. In fact, I think that what you just showed in the last slide shows a very virtuous cycle when we collect data and really use that data to inform policies, and then obviously try to also check how is it that those policies, those that are already being for a long time in the system, are really based on gender analytical work or not, or are really framing under the gender needs. So I think that to conclude, maybe I am really conscious about the time, so I don't know whether the organizers want us to open up for questions. But before getting or passing the baton to the organizers, just let me say that if there is one thing that we have been learning on working on gender and what we are hearing today, just confirming that, it's the importance of collect data. It's critical. We need to really be systematic on data collection, and B, trying to make sure that once that data is collected and informed the new projects, we then go back and collect data again to show the differences and to show really impact out of the effort. Because otherwise we might be really pushing very hard on raising awareness of the importance of data collection, but sometimes we are not yet pushing as hard on showing what is it that bringing data into or bringing changes and adjustments from gender lenses into projects, how much impact does it has for the overall country or for the overall county. So thank you, everyone. With this, I will pass the baton back to the organizers. And if you want us to open up for questions, that would be your decision, because I'm conscious of the time.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, because you're literally behind time, we'd like to move on very quickly to the next session. However, we encourage the viewers both here at the Stanley and joining us virtually to ask the questions on our chat box, and maybe the rest of the panel may be able to answer there. Or if we have enough time by the end of today's session, we should be able to try and get in touch with the panelists and feed them these particular questions, and hopefully they are able to answer. So we encourage you to continue having these questions. We'll try and see how we can fix them into this particular schedule. Very, very quickly, allow me to introduce the next session, which is Inclusivity Powered by Research. And here we are joined by Dr. Chinebuli Uzondu from the Federal University of Technology, Owerri. We have Lesedi Mukoma from the University of Pretoria in South Africa. We have Kwame Odame from World bicycle relief. And last but not least, we have Winnie Sambo. Let me take that again. We have Kwame Odame from the University of Education in Winneba. And last but not least, we have Winnie Sambo from Wild Bicycle Relief. Do we have the four joining us virtually?
Yes. Chinebuli is here. Chinebuli Uzondu.
Yes, Dr. Chinebuli. You can begin us with the session and walk us through this.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my screen. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay. So my name is Chinebuli Uzondu. I'll be presenting on a research we've been carrying out in the last 11 months on transport and mobility needs of elder persons in Nigeria and Uganda. It's being funded by the Volvo Research and Educational Foundation. So I'm going to talk about some of the results, a little aspect of our findings from some of the research we have conducted in this study, and I hope you enjoy it. So, yeah. So when we talk about safe and inclusive mobility, we're talking about this being very, very crucial in improving human living conditions. And this project has positive impacts towards different SDG goals, good health and well-being, SDG goals 8, decent work and economic growth, reduced inequalities, and 11, sustainable dynasties and communities. So this is what we tend to achieve in addition to all the results we've been getting in this project. And we hope that by the end of this project, we will stand up to say that, yes, whatever we have set out to achieve in this project was actually achieved. So we also hope that this will enhance access to, achieving this will enhance access to healthcare, food, to help to connect people with activities, recreation, and opportunities for different social contacts. So we looked at characteristics of sustainable transport system, and we believe they should have capabilities, should consider capabilities of those who use them. It should be safe and very convenient, so that it will readily provide options which people of different age groups, people of different backgrounds, different people of different gender should easily access and to be very comfortable for them. But unfortunately, available evidence on ground, especially in Africa, suggests that not much has been done regarding the transport needs of elderly persons in Africa. This project is actually looking at the capital city of Nigeria, which is Abuja, and Kampala in Uganda. Active mobility is very important in our lives. If we sit down to consider and just, for example, we assume that, okay, let me say, maybe during the lockdown, we most of us experienced inability to move around as we would love to. So if we put ourselves in that situation for like 1 month, and then we find out, we try to compare it with the lives of these people who whose mobility needs are not considered, especially in transport planning, we'll find out, we'll maybe have a little bit hands-on experience of what they experience every day. They continue to be largely neglected. Nobody talks about their needs. Nobody talks about the policies. There are policies actually, but they are not being implemented. And so these people have so many needs which are not met, largely because they are not able to go out. They cannot find transport. They cannot use the kind of transport, access the kind of transport they would want to. And so this impacts largely on their ability to go out, ability to provide for themselves, to take care of themselves, to do whatever they want. And this also impacts on health and, you know, their lives. And it is not the definition of active mobility. It's not the definition of sustainable mobility we would want to have for these ones. So most of these problems could be attributed to unavailability of information. There are very few studies, especially in Africa, looking at the mobility needs, behavior and patterns of travel of older persons, very, very few of them. So in this study, we are using a lot of, we are applying a mixed method approach. We first of all organized workshop discussions in both countries, where we invited different stakeholders, including those who are in charge of making policies. We invited older persons, members of the international organization, NGOs, and those in the academia, where we discussed the present conditions and what is happening. The aim of the workshop actually was to have insights into what is happening in these two countries and then design further studies from there. So after the workshop, we organized interviews first of all, for older persons, which we combined with travel diaries. We had them complete travel diaries for a full week. And then we also conducted interviews with stakeholders because we wanted to find out if actually there are policies and what is the state of these policies. Are they being implemented? Are people talking about them? Are they being enforced? And are there like monitoring and evaluation units where these things are being monitored to make sure that elderly persons, older persons, get the help they deserve, get whatever help they get from public transport. So this study explores difficulties in assessing different public transport modes. We also had conducted a very large scale survey where we looked at everything mobility for them, including how they assess their assessment of different types of public transport and the private transport available to them, and a lot of other things. But for this presentation, we're going to be looking at briefly at the results from the workshop discussions and semi-structured interviews. So we found out that there are various factors hindering their mobility. So these factors affect their ability to go out and to, you know, do the things they would want to do, when they want to do it, how they would want to do it, without any restrictions. So we find out that most of them talked about financial constraints. We're looking at 60 years plus, and at this age, most of them have retired. Those that are still strong enough are still working. Those who were civil servants, especially the teachers, said they had to go back to teach in private schools where they are not being paid very well. Some of them complained about their salaries and wages not being enough for transport, but because they wouldn't want to sit back at home, they try to take up these jobs and, you know, go out every day to improve their health. Some of them went into small scale businesses. Some of them had shops, open shops closer to home so that they wouldn't have to spend money on transport. Some of them said they would like to, very few of them, many of them mentioned that they try to, after when they found out that their finance was not enough for whatever they needed for, they had to limit themselves to going out around the neighborhood. So they go to churches and mosques near the neighborhood. They set up shops around their homes so that they could actually walk out conveniently and walk back to their homes. Some of them talked about discrimination from transport operators. Because of the way public transport is in this part of the world, most transport operators prefer younger persons who are strong enough, because sometimes people struggle to get into these buses. And so that is not what an elderly person would do. Sometimes some of them said sometimes they have been pushed, and then when they get to bus stops, what they do is to stand aside and wait for people to get in. And so that makes them spend like hours waiting for buses to get to where they are going. So they are not being helped in this regard. Some of them mentioned poor health conditions, as they are no longer as strong as they used to be. They have to assess medical assess medical facilities, and they cannot even walk and do the things they used to do before. So they are also limited talked about gender issues. We, from the travel diaries and all, we found out that mostly, most of the people who actually set up, who actually are into small scale businesses are females, and most of them are still breadwinners. Some of them are widows, so it is not, they said it has not been easy for them, so they just do what they can to, you know, keep living. And then poor implementation of policies. Even though this was mentioned in the interview with older persons, we also spoke largely about it in the interview with stakeholders. There are policies actually, but they are not being implemented. So we try to find out why, because all of us, we would want to grow old. So why is it that, since you are part of the policy makers, why is it that we are not doing anything to make sure these things are in place? Because at the end of the day, in 10 years, 20, 30 years time, we will retire, and we will get in, we all want to grow old. So at some point we would use, need the public, this transport system. So why is it that we wouldn't try to make sure that these things are in place, these things are taken care of clearly, before, you know, we retire? At least try what we can to put this in place. A lot of them mentioned, said some things. For example, in Nigeria, when we talk about the public transport, for example, it is public transport, but they are privately owned. They are not owned by the government. So it is very difficult for government to say, yes, you're going to keep this number of seats in this vehicle for elderly persons, and then we are going to, you know, without actually providing kind of incentives to the operators for this. If the government provides money, if they invest in transport, if they are very serious about helping the elderly persons, then there'll have to be some investment, and then some kind of understanding with these private public transport operators to say, yes, we are keeping this, so that even if people are struggling from buses, we know that 2-3 seats in this bus would be for elderly persons, and then governments, you know, provides for them, or if there are vouchers or so, anything, you know, to make sure that, yes, even though if they are going to give concession, let it be that governments would invest in these and come to an understanding with the operators and make sure these are in place. So amongst out-of-home activities mostly affected, they mentioned medical appointments and social outings, which we all know that these are very, very important, very, very important. You can imagine when people are not able to access their medical, cannot access medical needs. They cannot go to the hospital. They cannot go out to interact with friends and relatives when they would want to. So it is not really good. But there were some variations, like I said, in perception regarding government policies and mobility. In some instances, people said, especially with some big private public transport operators, they said they kind of have some policies and some programs for elderly persons on their own, not from the government. So we found out that yes, some, but they are not enough. There are very few of them. They are not enough, even though we cannot cater for everybody at the beginning, but you know, making substantial arrangements and trying to make sure people can access these services when and to wherever they want to go. It's very important in improving their health. So we kind of, from our studies, we tried to make some recommendations, and throughout in the last 11 months, we've been, you know, involved in various stakeholder roundtable discussions. We've been working with NGOs, and we actually involved some of these stakeholders from project inception. And so we've been discussing with them. We have engaged NGOs and trying to, you know, advocate for better transport needs for older persons. We want to bring their challenges to the limelight. We want to bring it to the attention of stakeholders and the government that these people need to be, you know, taken care of. We need to address their issues and try to find out what is happening and how we can help improve their transport and mobility needs. So we've talked about transport system and policy reforms. Even while some countries like Nigeria too is trying to develop the transport policy, so we are also trying everything we can through advocacy and involving stakeholders we've been working with, those who are in charge of policy in the country, to also put this out there, to stressing how important this is in the transport system. We talked about inclusive mobility planning and designs. This would be very, very important to bring them, to make them comfortable and include their needs in these things. We know that even if everybody may have their challenges with the transport system, these people are constrained because most of them are not as strong as they used to be. They do not have the kind of finance they used to have. They cannot do a lot of things they used to do before, so they need special attention, which we also have confidence that at the end of this project, our voices will be heard, and we would try everything